Hey folks, this is Rhykker with a guide on everything that you need to know about Season 4 to blast your way to 100, to level up fast, to get the most out of all the new systems in the game. Season 4 of Diablo 4 started this week. By day 2, my character was level 100 with maxed out glyphs, meaning all I have left to do now is perfect my gear. During my streams, I got asked a lot of questions, so I want to answer them here, and first tip that we're going to go through, in fact, is anytime a world boss is up, which is once every 3 hours, do it. Why? There is a resource that you get from world bosses called Scattered Prisms. Right here. These are needed to add sockets to gear, and the only deterministic way to get these is by doing world bosses. You will randomly get them at other times, but they're not all that common. I've gotten 11 in my entire journey to 100. I haven't even spent any, I don't think. So they're pretty rare. And if you can, if you're still leveling, try to push to the next world tier before doing the world boss. You always benefit by doing it on the highest world tier that you possibly can. And the world bosses are arguably easier to take down than ever. They're going to melt in all of a few seconds with all the extra power that we have this season, thanks to all the new tempering recipes, as well as masterworking. Again, we're day 3 now, and that's how fast a World Tier 4 world boss goes down. But speaking of world tiers, when you're getting started out, start on Veteran. Used to be that Adventurer was the best way to start. The XP bonus for Veteran wasn't quite enough. They have now buffed how much XP you get for playing on Veteran. The game is easier than ever, so it is worth it to start on Veteran. It's also worth it to skip campaign if all you care about is leveling efficiency. If you want to play the campaign for fun, then do it. But people ask me, is it worth skipping campaign? If all you care about is leveling efficiency, yes, skip the campaign. Now you want to aim to be in World Tier 3 by level 35. Ignore this recommended levels 50 to 70, level 35, because sacred items are equipable once you are level 35. Some people get to Nightmare even before level 35, and that's fine if you can handle it, but 35 you want to be in Nightmare, and you want to be in Torment, World Tier 4, by level 55, because that's when you can equip ancestral items. Sacred and ancestral gear represent such a huge jump in power that you want to equip them as soon as you possibly can. Now, what's the fastest way to level? What do you want to be doing? Again, World Tier 2, you're going to be starting off from level 1 in Helltide. Well, technically start off by doing the season quest, get that started. That's going to lead you to go into Helltide. Helltide, you look around the map, it is this reddish area here. Not these red areas, these are the PvP zones, but Helltide is up for 1 hour, down for 5 minutes, up for 1 hour, down for 5 minutes. So if you're not seeing a red area on the zone, wait a couple more minutes and it's going to pop up soon. Helltide is the most efficient way to level up now. You're going to do this all the way until World Tier 4. And while you're in here, you're going to be doing all the whispers in the Helltide. This is doubling up on your efficiency. Whispers are going to fill up down here. Once it's full, you got to go turn them in at the whisper tree, which is right over here. That's going to give you even more rewards, and ensure that whatever you're doing, you always have an elixir popped. All these elixirs give you bonus XP. This one gives 8%. The lower level ones give 5%, but be on the lookout for the little XP bonus because that extra bit does add up over time. Once you get to World Tier 4 and you get access to Nightmare Dungeons, then you want to be running Nightmare Dungeons. And you want to be running Nightmare Dungeons where the monsters are 10 levels above your level. Once you mouse over the glyph, you can now see the monster level. So always keep track, keep them exactly 10 levels above you for maximum XP acquisition. While some people might advise continuing to level in Helltide, I'm going to tell you you're going to regret it if that's what you do. And the reason for that is your Paragon glyphs. These here. I don't have to do another Nightmare Dungeon again for the rest of the season. Possibly. Because my glyphs are now all maxed. Nightmare Dungeons are the only thing that give you glyph XP. And your glyphs at level 21 represent an enormous jump in power that you're going to need for the pit at end game. So don't hold off on doing these. Level up with Nightmare Dungeons. It's really good XP and it's glyph XP. But if for whatever reason you can't be doing Nightmare Dungeons or you want to take a break, if you go back to Helltide, then definitely use the Profane Mine Cages in order to buff the Helltide monster level by 10. This way, it's going to be even more worth it to do your Helltide. While you're leveling inside Helltide, in World Tier 2, 2, you're getting a nerfed version of Helltide, not the updated Helltide that is crazy awesome Helltide of World Tier 3 and 4. You're going to see these Tortured Gifts of Mysteries. There's a few of these chests around the map. They cost 100 cinders. Doing activities in Helltide give you cinders. That's this resource up here. You want to be opening these. So ideally, don't be dying. Opening these chests also gives you XP, also gives you other resources. So ideally, minimize how much death you're suffering. That's also why it's best not to push into like World Tier 4 when you're so underleveled. You can't even equip ancestral gear. You're going to die all the time. In general, in our experience, we had the damage to kill stuff in World Tier 4 at very low level, but we were getting hit one shot by things and losing all of our cinders. Once you're in a position where you can safely farm Helltide without dying, you want to be stacking your cinders and you want to wait towards the end of Helltide, the last 15 to 20 minutes or so, to start popping these Gifts of Mysteries, because the XP reward scales with your level. So the higher level you are, the more you benefit. So again, by holding off, again, assuming you're not dying, because if you're dying, you're going to lose half your cinders, then it's best to wait to spend these. Another thing that you'll notice in Helltide is your new threat meter. As you successfully do stuff in Helltide, your threat meter rises. It's like a Grand Theft Auto police stars as you're committing crimes. Once this is full, you're going to spawn multiple waves of monsters on you, which is a great thing. Lots of XP, lots of loot. If you are in a party, you want to ensure that once one of you is about to pop, you call everyone close to you, because your waves of monsters will help your teammates fill their threat meter, and if you're lucky, you can start chaining these over and over. Now, another thing you're going to notice in Helltide is this right here, an accursed altar. You're going to be getting hearts, baneful hearts. It takes 3 hearts on these altars to summon the big event of Helltide. Big waves of monsters with a world boss tier threat at the end. Now, if you contribute 1 heart, at least 1 heart, you're going to get bonus loot. If you don't contribute anything, you're still going to benefit from this, just from all the XP and all the loot. But if you contribute 1, you get bonus. You don't get further bonuses by contributing 2 or 3. So ideally, you want to be putting in 1 and have other random people also put in 1 as well. Now, the thing with this fight is doing it in World Tier 2 or doing it on the earlier difficulties when you're lower level. I don't know that I advise it, because it is a very tough fight and it could take a long time. Now, it's possible that the deeper we go into season, the more you're going to have very powerful characters come in and just one-shot the boss. But I know that when we did it, it was not worth it at low level to do this event, because again, the final boss, killing her, was just not worth it. The amount of time that it took to kill her, we could have been just farming Helltide regularly, we wouldn't have been dying over and over, we could have been spending our cinders, and it would have been more worth our while. So what you can maybe do is judge where you are in the season, see if you have high-level people running around there with you to help you out. Now, speaking of the season, your hub is going to be right over here in the Iron Wolf encampment. There's not an elaborate storyline here. You basically have a bounty board. You keep earning Wolf's Honor, which you're going to do by just doing Helltides, and you're going to be able to turn in rewards. You want to turn in these rewards as soon as you can. Do not hold on to them. They do not scale with level, meaning the maximum benefit you get from the items from this track is as soon as you can possibly open it. And these rewards are fantastic. They are worth doing. They are worth pursuing, especially in the lower levels. While doing the season journey, you're also going to be getting your seasonal blessings. These smoldering ashes unlock. How do you spend these? Number 1, Urn of Aggression, boost to XP earned from monster kills. You're killing a ton of monsters in Helltide. This is what you want to max out first. Once you are in Nightmare Dungeons, then you want to start putting your excess ones in here. Still keep this filled, then you fill out your Urn of Nightmares. And after that, it's kind of up to you, depending on what activity you're doing. If you're in Helltide and you want to be completing your Iron Wolf reputation, you can be boosting that. Obols are now actually super valuable, so it is also worth boosting your Obols. And with the Whispers, if ever you're out of gold, I actually was surprised to see that gold was my rate limiting factor here this season. I ran out of gold before I ran out of other materials. Completing a round of Whispers and turning in a greater collection earns you the most gold. It seems like the chaos reward earns you the most gold, and also if it's a greater reward. You're getting millions of gold per turn in here. The season journey also is going to give you some pretty decent rewards now, especially if it is on a build that you want to run. So sort of like Diablo 3 Hadrig's Gift, you're going to get caches that give you a suite of items that are tailored towards a specific build for your class. If you're chasing that build, you can go after it, as well as if it's relatively easy to complete these. I wouldn't go too far out of my way. As you can see, I haven't even finished chapter 4, and I didn't feel the need to. Now we'll talk about gear here. The biggest change of Season 4 is the Codex of Power. People are asking, how do I extract my aspects now? You extract your aspects just by going over to the blacksmith and salvaging your item. Once you salvage an item, it's going to yeet the aspect into your Codex of Power. And now you permanently have it unlocked to be used an infinite amount of times. And what it does is it extracts it at the level that you have it. So if you find a better version of that aspect, now you're going to replace the worst version with a better version. So over here, for instance, I'm at 16 of 16. I now have the best version of this aspect. But for this one, reanimation, I'm only at 14 of 16, meaning I could still be finding a better version of that aspect to extract. Speaking of the blacksmith, you'll notice that the regular upgrade system is gone. It's replaced by two systems, Tempering and Masterworking. We'll talk more about those later, but in short, Masterworking is something you're only focusing on in the very late game, whereas Tempering is something that you can start doing pretty much immediately. And one regret I have is actually not making use of Tempering earlier. I didn't realize that Tempering actually costs no gold, and the resources of Tempering are pretty plentiful. But more on that later. We mentioned that you want to reach World Tier 3 and then World Tier 4 as soon as possible, and rather as soon as you can be equipping those items. The reason is the jump to Sacred and then Ancestral gear. Now in World Tier 3, only Sacred gear drops, and in World Tier 4, only Ancestral gear drops. Meaning, as soon as you get into World Tier 3, you are going to go to your gambler and just buy any two-handed weapon, or I guess if you're a rogue using melee, then you would have to buy one-handers. But basically, you're just guaranteed to get a sacred item. Weapon is the most important thing to upgrade. It's going to represent the biggest boost to your power. So instead of spending all of your obols, at least get a weapon upgrade. Doesn't matter that it's going to be rare, because you can always then imprint it with an aspect. And remember that on a two-handed weapon, the aspect gets doubled its power. Now, if there's an aspect that you really need for your build while leveling 1 to 50, it's best to put that on your amulet, and then never change out your amulet. Your amulet will give it a 1.5 times multiplier, meaning it's 50% stronger on an amulet. The thing is, with a weapon, you always want to be swapping out to a stronger weapon whenever you find one, so if you put your best aspect on that, it's going to be too expensive to constantly replace. This is no longer a problem once you're in the later game. And another reason that the obols are so valuable, once you're level 100, every item you gamble is now going to be item power 925. We can demonstrate that right now with a tunic here. 925, 925, 925, 925, 925, 925. Rare items, forget about them. They're not going to be used in the endgame anymore. You see they only have 2 affixes, whereas legendaries have 3 plus the legendary affix. So there's some usage case early game where you might be using rares, but in endgame, all you care about are the legendaries. 925 item power is the highest item power that you can get. And now we have something called greater affixes. You can see 1, 2, and 3 of my items have this little star icon on them, which is similar to the icon next to that max life, 1,310 max life. This is called a greater affix. Greater affixes only start dropping in World Tier 4. A greater affix is an affix that rolls 50% higher than a regular affix, and you can get lucky enough where all of your affixes are greater affixes. This also applies to unique items, by the way. The only way to get items with greater affixes as drops, or you can gamble for them. And if you are re-rolling, if you are enchanting at the occultist, you can never get a greater affix. If I were to select max life and re-roll that, it would lose its greater affix status, and it can never re-roll into a greater affix. All right, let's talk about the new system, Tempering. So, Tempering, again, you can start doing, I believe, as of World Tier 2, honestly. It could help a lot with the Capstone Dungeon, same thing going into World Tier 4. Tempering. Your first tempering recipe is going to be found in a little box over here. You're going to get these recipe drops. As soon as you get it, you want to right-click it to learn it. There's no reason to stack these. In fact, it is detrimental to hold off because as long as you have not learned a recipe, you can always get that recipe as a drop. So what happens? People are stacking the recipes and they are getting duplicates in their inventory. And then they learn a recipe and then they have that same recipe and it says you already know this recipe. And they're like, what do I do with this now? It's a waste. Just right click it to make it go away. There's nothing you can do with it. You cannot sell it. You cannot make anything productive happen out of it. Once you have gotten every recipe to max, you will no longer get recipes to drop. How do you get recipes? Just play the game. They're going to drop. So tempering. On ancestral gear, you can temper twice. Tempering is a little anvil symbol here. You can see max life and decrepify size. Lower tier gear, you can only temper one time. And while you can temper ancestral gear with 2 affixes, they must be from 2 different categories. Different item slots will have access to different recipes. Let's put in this chess piece. For instance, we have defense and utility. So you can have 1 defense and 1 utility. You cannot have 2 defense. For instance, you select from what's available, and from within that category, it will randomly roll one of the 3 things in there. You select it, you temper it, you hit skip, you close, and now if you're not happy with that, you can re-roll. You only have a limited amount of re-rolls, however. 5 re-rolls in total. So here we re-roll. Are we happy now? Maybe we are, maybe we're not, whatever. You can apply your second temper. Let's go with increasing the size of one of our things. We temper it, and now you see we have our 2 recipes, and our reroll attempts are shared between these 2. Once you are out of reroll attempts, you cannot temper this item any further. It is effectively bricked. The item isn't destroyed, but you can no longer temper it. You need to temper items before you can masterwork them. One last note about tempering is that these recipes, they don't scale with level, so tempering is actually a fantastic way to level alts. Another note about tempering is that if you temper onto a 2-handed item, you get double the benefit. So you're not losing out on a temper by going for a 2-hander. But onto the masterworking. Again, once you have tempered an item, now you can begin to masterwork it. Masterworking is going to be your very long tail progression system, and it's going to incrementally upgrade things. There's a total of 12 levels of masterworking. This one is just masterwork level 1 of 12. We're going to upgrade it again here. You can see the costs. Boom, we upgrade it. All affixes increased by 5%. We're going to now take it to tier 3. Again, we go. Now, at rank 4, every 4 ranks, so on rank 4, 8, and 12, rather than boost all of its affixes by 5%, it's going to randomly select 1 affix to boost by 25%. This is an RNG element. You cross your fingers, you upgrade. What are we going to get? We got the roll on. We got it on armor. You can see that it's now blue. So that is... I'm not happy with that. And we'll explain why, actually. I forgot to mention, there is now a maximum amount of armor that you ever need in the game. And that number is 9,230. 9230. There is never a reason to get more than 9,230 armor. That'll max you out at 85% physical damage reduced. Now, thankfully, you can always reset masterwork ranks if you are unhappy. You're going to lose the resources, but at least you cannot brick your item with masterworking. You're always free to reset it. And you'll notice this is costing us resources that we must farm from the pit. We're going to get into the pit in a moment here, but one note on trade. Trading has now been opened up. You can trade basically everything in the game other than uber uniques. So if you're playing with buddies, you find a unique item that you don't need, they might be able to take it. Same thing with any rares, any legendaries. However, once you have crafted onto them, these items then become account bound. So you cannot prep up a beautiful item for your friend and then give it to them. You just got to give them the base resource to work on. Now, the pit is a new endgame system. You find this in Karagar, and you unlock it by completing a tier 46 nightmare dungeon. To open the pit requires a resource. The pit is like Greater Rifts in Diablo 3, so you need GR keys. You get these by just doing either Helltide or Nightmare Dungeons. You go to this obelisk here. From here, you see the cost of opening an Artificer's Pit. There's a total of 200 ranks of these, and this is the most challenging content in the game. I believe a pit level 150 is equivalent to an Abattoir of Zaeith level 25, the max level of Abattoir of Zaeith, meaning the pit goes up to level 200, being far more challenging than the Abattoir of Zaeith. How does the pit work? Again, it's like Greater Rifts, where you have 15 minutes to kill a bunch of enemies. No items drop until the very end, so it is just pure, unadulterated death. It's the most fun gameplay loop in the game. You just go through, you're killing things. Again, you got 15 minutes to do so. The first time you die, you or anyone in your party dies, it costs you 30 seconds. Second death, I believe, is 60. Third and subsequent is 90 seconds. Again, that's anyone in the party docks you that, so you definitely want to avoid death. Only the person who opens the pit level has to spend the resource, and at the end, they're the ones who are going to get the most resource out of it. So in other words, they get the brunt of the rewards of masterworking materials, because the pit is where you're going to farm your masterworking materials. Once you've killed enough enemies, you then need to kill the Guardian within the remaining time. And again, if you do so, that's when you get your the bounty of your resources. You still get a reward if you don't complete the pit in time, but not nearly as much. I think you might not get the crafting resources. You'll still get item drops at the end. So if I get my big bonk, because Minion Necro is crazy OP, source of the power is Golem on the regular minion build. So again, you get these resources, and in the mystery chest, boom, you get your masterworking mats, as well as some obols, which are still useful. Now, the last thing I'll talk about is the Uber bosses, or the Tormented bosses, rather. So we have all these boss summoning materials, and Dariel is a new Uber boss that you can summon. She is the equivalent loot table as Duriel. These are the two materials you need to summon her: Sand Scourge Shackles and Pin Cushion Doll. There are also, however, Tormented versions, level 200 versions of all the Uber bosses. These are worth doing. They cost 3 times the materials to open, but give you 5 times the reward. So, if you believe your build can handle it, hold off and run the Tormented versions of these bosses. These are, however, very challenging fights. And that's going to wrap up this video, folks, but do sound off in the comments with your tips for Season 4. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Special thanks to my supporters for making these videos possible, and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more Diablo content.